And we are back, another edition of the CBB Central podcast, the last one before the NBA draft, which is always pretty crazy because, at least in my mind, Brad, and I think the calendar has changed a little bit because of, the more and more transfers that happen late in the game. But it feels to me like after the NBA draft, college basketball news, at least in terms of news that will impact next year's rosters, really slows down and it really becomes preview time. We've been kind of previewing things for a while, but at this point, I mean, there's still some guys out there. Obviously, Blackshear's the big name, Shakir Houston as well. But when the NBA draft comes around, it always feels like a transition point. And obviously, the draft will be exciting in itself. We'll talk about it a little bit today on this podcast. But it's interesting to start to feel the end of the off season that is off season. Without games and without practices, at least, next couple weeks teams will be on campus. I believe in the next 2 weeks, both Northwestern and Siena do enroll their kids for summer session. So we're starting to move closer.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Blackshear, and he's clearly the best transfer on the board right now. He really only impacts his impact in terms of where he chooses, that impact on college basketball is going to be pretty small because Kentucky top 5 team with or without him. Maybe they move to consensus 1, 2, or 3, depending on what you think of Kansas or Michigan State. But then it moves Texas A&M like a bubble team, maybe not even a bubble team, and it puts Tennessee in the top 25. But that's just such a small impact. Because you mentioned most of these guys are off the board already. Like the best players to the left, like Derek Thornton. Like, is that just will he just choose Gonzaga? Is that a foregone conclusion? Same with Houston in Oregon. Haven't heard anything about Ryan Wardage, but there's a couple teams that could still use a point guard. I saw Kelvin Jones is out there. He visited Creighton. That's a makes too much sense fit for him. Haven't heard anything about DJ Williams from George Washington, but he could make a rotation at the high major level. And then Scanlon from BU. He has a bunch. I saw Florida. I saw Illinois. Both could come off the bench. But I mean, if the 5th most impactful transfer in Tyler Scanlon is going to be like Florida's 8th or 9th man, I think that puts in perspective kind of what the transfer market is right now.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think it also kind of depends on whether guys go to the place that are most needed or the place that they just want to be at. Because I think, for instance, Tyler Scanlon would be a lot more impactful on Michigan than he would be on Florida. Even if I can't confess to watching a ton of BU basketball this year. Like, I try to watch as much as I can in the mid-major landscape. I don't remember watching a BU game this year. I mean, statistically, he looks solid. He could pass it a little bit. Maybe he could be like a 3-man when they want to go a 3-man, so you don't have to play Livers at the 3. Maybe he plays more DJ Williams, same way. Could he start at the 3 at Michigan? There's teams that still need fits. I think Michigan's the one team in particular that is still has a lot of potential, but has significant spots to fill that will start. I mean, Oregon, it becomes kind of a value versus want. I mean, getting Shakir Houston would help, but I mean, it's not like they're hurting for starters. The Kelvin Jones situation, as you mentioned, it just makes too much sense. I mean, if he doesn't commit to Creighton, I'd be stunned. The one that I really loved was that Memphis is trying to get on Blackshear. It doesn't sound like they're going to get a visit, so it seems unlikely. But I mean, can you imagine?
Like, why would they even want to do that?
That was what I was.
He's better than like Isaiah Maurice, but you have Wiseman. You have Achua at the 4. I mean, I guess you slide Achua up and Wiseman up, but that doesn't feel like the type of brand Memphis is going to play like a traditional 2 big lineup.
Well, I will say this: is it impossible that Kerry Blackshear is better than James Wiseman? / isn't he? What percentage chance do you reckon Kerry Blackshear being better than James Wiseman this year is?
Pretty low, I think.
Really?
I mean, Blackshear's good, but
Blackshear's a 15-7 guy on a Sweet 16 team. We know that he's 22 years old. He's big physical. James Wiseman's a guy who's had motor problems. Freshman bigs tend to underperform. I know we talk about that a lot. I mean, like, I'm not saying you're bringing him in to push Wiseman off the bench. That's not happening. And I don't get it. I mean, I was talking on Twitter with John Pugliese, who's coached college basketball at every level. Was kind of talking about it. I said, it feels kind of superfluous, especially given how you're going to wreck spacing. I mean, Precious Achiuwa is going to play the three. He can't really shoot. And what's one thing for a guy who can't really shoot, who's an athletic four-man who can put the ball on the deck and space out and be on the perimeter at least. If he's your three all of a sudden, I mean, so much pressure on Boogie and Lester Quinones, but he was arguing for opening up more driving lane, or not opening up more driving lane, opening up more easy post ups, killing the rebounding battle. Teams aren't going to play zone because they're not prepared to play zone, etc. I mean, I don't know that I buy it. I don't think it's going to happen, but I thought it was just interesting. It felt like Memphis was like, well, we have a scholarship, and he's the only guy out there that we feel like we need. Why don't we just, or that we feel like is good enough to like be a high impact player for us? We might as well just try to get him.
And if you're Blackshear and you have 1 year left, I mean, why even go to a place that risks you coming off the bench, right? Like, at least with Kentucky, I mean, he would start over Richards, he would start over Sestina, right? He's pretty clearly in the starting lineup, and that's going to be a top 5 team. I mean, what if he gets to Memphis and go with the Wiseman and Achiuwa front court, and he's coming off the bench for his last year, and he passed up opportunities at Tennessee where he'd be a real difference maker. Texas A&M, he'll be the difference between a bottom 3 SEC team and a bubble team potentially. But even that's not guaranteed. He could end up in the NIT there. And then Memphis is the highest risk of coming off the bench. It's not even the best team or best program. It just doesn't pass a sniff test.
Yeah, I don't see it. I just thought it was a really funny rumor, quite frankly. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. There's still some guys out there. I was talking to a friend in the college basketball world the other day, and basically said, and he was like, well, there's so much out there, and I was like, there's simultaneously a ton out there and none out there, because there's so many names out there, and there's I think a lot of guys that in the right situation could help a program, but like, if you're like, let's say you're a mid-major coach, you have a couple hundred names left in the portal, but how many of them fit you regionally? How many of them are guys who you can get into school? How many guys are you looking for JUCO? How many are good enough to go to your level? How many are too good to go to your level? Like, you just run out of time quick. And in terms of guys who are going to make a national impact, I mean, we are definitely dwindling. I think there's a lot of guys who can make a mid-major impact, which could then make a national impact. But we'll see what happens. Certainly enough to move along with, but after the draft, I would imagine we will start pivoting towards that deep dive series that we like to do every summer and should be fun. Also have a lot of content for you guys on my website coming up. I'll hopefully get an updated transfer rankings list. This week's big one is the coaching hires rankings. I've spent my day today, Brad, ranking all 54 permanent coaching hires that were made this offseason.
Did you grade them or did you rank them? Like did you assign a letter grade or did you put them in order?
Put them in order.
There we go. I love it.
I separated the high major coaches and the mid major coaches. And then what I did was basically the ranking was based on how a team should have been able to hire. So, like, for instance, I can put Appalachian State hiring Dustin Kearns over UNLV hiring TJ Otzelberger, even if I know Otzelberger to be a more proven and good coach, because for Appalachian State, landing Dustin Kearns was a better pull.
Yeah.
So that's the methodology. It'll be out later this week. I'm still kind of planning on how I want to lay it out there, but I have about 4,000 words logged up in coaching rankings, so that'll be fun stuff to look out for, and we'll have plenty of good content like that for you guys on the podcast and on the website that I run over this offseason. But let's first, Brad, before we talk about your shooting guard rankings today, let's talk about the NBA draft because it is the last Sunday before it, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Pretty crazy. It's an early draft this year. And a lot of question marks, especially when the Pelicans take the 4th pick from the Lakers in the Anthony Davis trade, which was obviously so interesting yesterday afternoon. So we just kind of want to talk about some guys we think are undervalued, some guys we think are overvalued, just more general takeaways about the process as a whole.
Yeah, so first, just on that Pelicans trade, I find it interesting because now they have this 4th pick, but out of I refer to it on Twitter as like the second tier. It's really more of like a third tier, right? Like if Zion's one, then Ja and RJ are in the second tier. It's really the third tier of prospects, right? So it's like your Culver, Hunter, Reddish, Garland, and White. None of those really fit great with this Pelicans roster. I think Culver's probably the best fit, although I think you can also make an argument for Hunter. But I think with the pieces they have, they need some shooting and they need a big man. And you can't really get that at this stage, at least at like the impact level that you would want with the fourth pick, right? Like, there's no way you're taking Tyler Hero at 4. That'd be insane. But even if say that you traded down, or like they traded for a pick to get Hero, in their core, he's probably not an impact enough shooter. If that makes sense. Like they need some more guys who are going to play a lot of minutes who can really shoot, and then in the front court they need like a rim protector or at least I think like a legitimate center to play next to Zion. And I'm sure that they'll run some Zion small ball 5, but you still need to have that traditional center there as a different look.
Yeah, I mean, they're in an interesting spot. I think the interesting question, I mean, if you're going to hold on to Drew Holiday, which I think they will, you're pretty much set at the 1 and the 2 because you're going to play Alonzo and you're going to play Drew Holiday. And I think that pairing really works because both of them are really good defenders. Lonzo can push the break in transition. Drew can kind of run the show in the half court. I think that's a pretty natural fit for Lonzo in terms of a landing spot for him. Zion at the 4 obviously makes sense. The question it really becomes is can you invest in Jarrett Culver knowing that you now have Zion, who's not a great shooter, Zoe's not a great shooter, Drew Holiday, not an amazing shooter, and you're going to build around Culver, who shot 32% this year. And that's really tough. Problem is what do you do? I think Garland would fit really well if you didn't have Drew Holiday, but do you ditch Drew Holiday and just go all in on young guys to draft Darius Garland? I don't know that you do that. Do you trade this 4th pick for an established guy? Maybe. One name I saw being tossed around today on Twitter for them was could they go for Nikola Vucevic? Make a really good front court. He could step out and shoot the 3, so he wouldn't kill the spacing with Zion. Not going to play on the perimeter anyway a lot. I mean, he was legit 20 and 12 guy, an all-star this year. Good passer. I think that could work if they wanted to throw close to max money at him. Then maybe keep the draft like a DeAndre Hunter 3-and-D type. Not a high usage guy. You already have Josh Harton there. You have Ingram who could shoot the ball. Fill it out with some veterans and you see what happens from there. I think it could work. But it's interesting. I mean, in terms of philosophy. But if you're the Pelicans, I mean, I think you're just kind of talking about this trade before we go into the draft as a whole. I think getting the return that they got is really awesome. Just in terms of long-term assets and still short-term talent enough to put around Zion and short-term flexibility to bring in more talent to put around Zion so you can win now and you can potentially win in the future. And obviously, who knows what that Lakers pick is valued at in 2024, 2025 type frame. I mean, obviously, LeBron will probably be done by then. AD would probably still be there, maybe not. I mean, if it all falls apart, the Lakers could be absolutely destroyed. But one of those things, LeBron James, you got to take a risk.
Yeah, and this is a necessary swing, for the Lakers. And I think that the Pelicans did well, and I don't know how deep they are into a rebuild because I think Holiday doesn't get as much credit for how good he is, and then Zion should be an instant impact guy in the front court. So that Julius Randle turned down his player option, which was for $9 million. I had no idea that he played so well this year. Averaged like 21 and 7. I thought I saw on Twitter earlier today. So he'll certainly, in theory, make more than $9 million next year. But what I also want to get to in the draft too is that the center market is just so overly saturated. There's way more NBA caliber centers and NBA starting centers than there are spots. And I think we saw that last year with guys like Brook Lopez, taking very little money, Julius Randle ending up essentially agreeing to be backup behind Anthony Davis, and a lot of these guys who are playing center now in previous generations would have been power forwards, and that kind of exacerbates the problem. But even without that, there's way too many centers. I know you mentioned Vucevic, who's a free agent. Marcus Cousins is also a free agent. If you kind of want to take a swing there, I think you might want a better defensive guy. Brook Lopez is out there. He can give you the floor spacing. Same with Dwayne Dedmon. They can both block shots a little bit. I think Dedmon's better in that regard than Lopez. I mean, there are a lot of centers. I mean, going through the free agent list, guys like DeAndre Jordan, Robin Lopez, some of the cheaper guys like Kevon Looney, Noah Vonleh, Ed Davis, Ken Freed. Freed's not really a fit anywhere anymore. And then going to the restricted free agents, I mean, they're not going to get a Porzingis, but Cauley Stein, maybe he's gettable if the Kings don't want to match him. Thomas Bryant has had a great year for Washington. He's a restricted free agent. Bobby Portis also with Washington is restricted. So I mean, there are 8 or 9 legitimate options that the Pelicans can go for, and I'm not 100% knowledgeable on their current salary, but I think that they should have some money available to go after someone.
I think the challenge as you talk about the centers, Brad, is the amount of guys that are in the draft, and at what point does the value of these centers that you're going to have to pay, even if you're getting them getting them on the cheap, I guess. At what point why are you paying Noah Vonleh anything or Willie Cauley-Stein anything if you could get Daniel Gafford in the early second round? Like, are you comfortable enough with what Daniel Gafford can give you that you don't need to invest in Willie Cauley-Stein? Or are you comfortable? I mean, obviously, some teams might reach on Goga Bitadze. I mean, obviously, Bol shooting is intriguing. Jackson Hayes seems like the best center in this class in terms of his upside and rim running ability right now. It just becomes a difficult thing if you're adding a lot more centers to this pool. What teams are going to want to invest in one of these veteran centers if they can just get a young one who's cost controlled and quite frankly might be able to do 80 to 90% of what is already being done by the veteran.
And when the carousel stops spinning, there are going to be so many good players, specifically big men, that are out there that teams could just pick up at the minimum. And it's like these guys are much more than minimum players, but there's no one to pay them. And there's such like an oversaturation that you can get, if you wait long enough and you're a good team, you can get a good player for much lower than their market value just because of the abundance of centers. And conversely, if you're a team in a rebuild like Atlanta, maybe like Atlanta did last year with like Alex Len and those guys, where they have to spend money to get to the floor, and they can kind of overpay to bring guys in, and then look to trade them to get an asset. But I don't think guys who are like guys are either going to have to choose between being on a good team and taking very little money, or being on a bad team and being paid adequately. For the most part, once the top 3 or 4 guys come off the board, because you mentioned with the cost controlled centers. I mean, guys like Gafford, guys like Bruno Fernando, guys like Kabengele, even like Nick Claxton. When you're making your mock draft and you think, well, these guys should be higher. I was like, where are they going to go?
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I will say, kind of generally on your point, I think about do you get paid less than you're worth to go win? I think the idea could be if you're a Brook Lopez, you might have been able to get more money last offseason, but by being put in a role in with the Bucks, they really maximized your strength. That money might be there the following year, if not more money, and you got a chance to win. So I think that's the balance there. But I think. Yeah, I mean you're absolutely right. There's just a limited number of spots. It feels like I think what everyone wants and needs right now are just like 3-and-D guys, right? Like everyone in the draft, if they can, especially in a bad draft like this, if you can come away with a capable rotation player who can defend multiple positions, shoot threes, kind of that DeAndre Hunter type, I think you'll feel pretty good. Especially knowing, especially if you didn't have to swing for the fences in a draft where there aren't as many, boom type selections.
Yeah, exactly. I think that these three things that when you're making a mock, you say, oh, this team can need, and there's just not enough of them. It's high upside prospects like the boomer bust guys, 3-point shooting, and guys who can, guys who are athletic, like have the perimeter athleticism and then can play the four. I think those are the three things where it's like, not so much like a PJ Washington or like a Grant Williams, but like more of like your Chuma Okeke if he was healthy, maybe even like a Keldon Johnson. I think those guys who are big enough to play the four, while I mean you mentioned Hunter and that's the perfect example at like the top of the draft. Guys who are quick enough to play the four still have some perimeter skills, but you don't give up too much size on the inside.
Yeah, and I think that brings us in nicely to guys we think are maybe a little bit undervalued versus guys we maybe think are a little bit overvalued. Because I think, for instance, a guy I think is being overvalued is Rui Hachimura, just because what people are saying he can be is not what he is. Like he's very unaware defensively. He misses a lot of passes. Like he can obviously score the ball, but he does so in spots on the court that aren't necessarily efficient. And, I guess some of it's just a bet on him getting better because he's already gotten better a lot in his college career. And, you can't teach 6'8", 230 athletic. You put it on the deck, but he's not really a shooter right now. How much can bully ball get you? I think he can be a bench scorer in the NBA. I think the upside idea is maybe a little bit flawed, whereas I think with a guy like Chuma Okeke, who, talk about the similar measurables, Rui's listed 6'8", 330, so is Chuma. Chuma is a better shooter. He's a more versatile and smart defender. He blocks shots, he gets steals. How much value is there in a guy who can just bully his way to the basket and get a bucket? And even if you trust the Rui shooting, would you rather just have the package of versatile defender like Chuma Okeke over Rui Hachimura?
Yeah, I think I agree with the Hachimura one. He does have some potential as a scorer, but to not be a good defender, to still be kind of a project on that end, and then the team that he's being heavily rumored to have a promise is Minnesota at 11. And they already have Saric at the 4, and Saric certainly much better, better floor game. And then Hachimura, he can't, right? He can't play small ball 5 at this stage, and he can't play the 3. So in the league that kind of values the versatility and in the multi-positional nature, he can only play one spot, which is fine. But when you factor in like Minnesota has Saric and they're going to be playing Towns a lot, and they have Wiggins and Covington on the wing already, this one just really doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. Who else do you think is kind of undervalued at this point versus maybe someone who's being a little bit overrated in this process?
So one that really jumps out to me would be Ty Jerome, because for me he fell into my second round. Just guys fall sometimes even if you like them, and he can play multiple positions. He can knock down shots. Right, he's a smart player. He could be your secondary ball handler, and in the right lineups he can be your point guard. And I think his high IQ. And just his overall style of play, I think makes him an ideal fit for a team, maybe like Philadelphia, who has a ton of picks between 24 and 44, and they have I think 10 free agents. like 10 open spots in their roster. So they're going to need to fill it out with productive players to kind of put around Simmons and Embiid. And I think Jerome would be a great fit with one of their 4 picks in that range.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because there's just, I mean, if you're drafting in the early second round, if you're lucky, if you can get a guy who's going to immediately help you with one skill, I mean, you have to do it. And I mean, Ty Jerome is not Joe Harris. Like they're different. They're fundamentally different players. But I think the level of impact that Joe Harris makes on an NBA team in terms of like a pure shooter who could play, I mean, Joe Harris can't play the one as much as Ty Jerome can or handle the ball. But I think just the pure impact of like a shooter off the bench is highly valuable. So I think Jerome is definitely a guy that I would target. What was that?
So I was gonna go with someone who I think is being overvalued right now.
Sure.
I was gonna link these two together because I have the same reasoning as to why I think that they're being overvalued. That's Brandon Clark and Grant Williams, where I see a lot of people, talking about how unique these guys' skill sets are. But I think when push comes to shove, right? Like with Brandon Clark, right? I mean, he's great motor, great defensive player, super athlete, right? He fits this kind of archetype that's like very valued of like a small ball 5 who can move laterally and can defend on the perimeter. But I think with both Williams and Clark, we're getting to a spot where like, yeah, what these guys do is nice, but the fit I think is going to be way too specific. Where a lot of teams are going to be better off, playing their traditional 5. So I think that kind of limits, like for example, one potential landing spot I saw for Brandon Clark was Boston, and like he's a nice change of pace, but when you have Horford and you have, I mean, Baines is still going to play. It's like you're going to invest like a lottery pick or like a closer lottery pick on a guy, to be like an interesting wrinkle for like 15 minutes a game. I don't really see how he's like a full-time starter. And I've seen people have him as high as number 2 on their board, Brandon Clark. And then for Williams, he's high IQ, very quick, right, for his size. But unless Williams can play small ball 5 too, I don't see why Williams is a better option at the 4 than using like a natural wing. Like for example, if like Grant Williams say went to, I don't know, like Chicago or something, and then Chicago also drafted DeAndre Hunter, like wouldn't the DeAndre Hunter archetype be more valuable if you have that player to play power forward as opposed to a guy like Williams?
So I think kind of with the 2 points, so you took Clark for Boston. The one thing I'll say with that is Brandon Clark is such an elite instincts rim protector, bungee cord athlete. Even if he's not going to shoot it, but he can get downhill on the drive occasionally. Has a couple of moves. He gets that spin move he goes to a lot. If you're Boston, could you play him at the 4, Horford at the 5? Horford can step out and shoot the 3, so he's not always on the perimeter. So he's not always down low. It's not killing your spacing because Horford's shooting. And Clark can provide energy, defensive awareness, and really impact the game. I think with Grant Williams, the argument is similar in that getting really smart guys who defend, make the smart pass, get downhill, get fouled. I think Grant Williams, the argument is if he can shoot threes, which I think people think he will be able to do, and if he can defend the 3, instead of having to go play small ball 5, he can play 3 in the 4. Then you can go really high on him. The disconnect between NBA draft Twitter, who has like Grant Williams top 10, and like the NBA, which seems to have him as like an early second round pick, is pretty large. But I think if you if you're the Trailblazers, for instance, I think a guy who is as smart, physical, and skilled as Grant Williams would be perfect. I mean, it's I guess it's somewhat of like a Mo Harkless type of mold, but a smarter defender and and a better athlete. And like, is that valued at 20? I think that is.
Yeah, for me, I see both their skill sets as like too specialized. That's like the main thing for me. Like yes, what these guys can do is really impressive, but I think in this case, people are focusing on too much on what they can do that's unique and not just like how they would fit conceivably. Um, if that makes sense, I think they're missing the forest for the trees, right? That's the expression.
Yeah, no, I'll buy that. Here's my question for you. Where do you stand on Bol Bol? I think he's probably the most polarizing player in the class. I was actually kind of pondering today if you could have Bol Bol or Jonte, who would you take and why? But my thing with Bol is like I understand every single concern that someone has with Bol Bol, but I also think like he's 7'2", can dribble, shoot threes, and block shots. And I think I'd rather take her anywhere below 10. I mean, like we're talking about one of the worst draft classes people can remember, and like anywhere below 10, you're just looking for a guy who can play. Are we sure that Bobo's so unplayable in the NBA? Like you're looking for a guy who could ever be who could be a solid rotation player. Are we so sure that Bobo can't play? That he's not worth the upside. Like I have a hard time not taking him in the lottery.
I agree 10,000%. I've seen so much. People say he's too slight. He can't defend in space. Et cetera. Like he kind of looks lax out there. And those are all reasons that I cited for not having Oregon in my top 25 in the preseason. Before settling in with them at like 24th or 25th last year. But what this draft is lacking the most is high upside prospects, right? I mean, compared to the field, guys like Romeo Langford are considered high upside prospects, right? When he's never really been able to shoot it. A guy like Brandon Clark is considered, like a dice roll, right? And he's like what 22, 23 years old. So this draft is just so devoid of the high upside guys that Bol's undeniably high upside, I think, should be valued more. And specifically a team like Atlanta, you have 8, 10, and 17. I mean, I would give them a long look at number 10. You're in one of the steepest rebuilds. You have a lot of picks. I think this is a perfect opportunity for them to roll the dice. Because if it works and Bol is going to come in and average 21-7 and be like a really good center, like I don't see how that's not worth the risk when you have three top 17 picks. I would be shocked if they let him slip past 17. I think that fit is just so perfect. And then you mentioned earlier the point about this is considered a pretty bad draft. The other draft that people kind of universally degrade would be the 2013 draft because Anthony Bennett went number 1. Guys like Nerlens Noel, Alex Len, Ben McLemore in the top 10 didn't pan out. That draft has given us Victor Oladipo, Otto Porter, C.J. McCollum in the top 10, Steven Adams, and then guys who were at the time seen as high upside picks, like the real boomer bust, who have worked out. The aforementioned Adams, he was not good in college. I mean, that was a complete like pedigree pick, and that worked out so well for the Thunder. Also, Giannis, who that was like the ultimate boomer bust. Rudy Gobert, picked 27th in that draft, also an ultimate boomer bust, right? So I think especially when the draft isn't as good, the ability to take a high upside player, I think should be valued more. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, let me just read 13 through 23 in this draft. 10 picks, basically late lottery to when like the contenders really start picking. And I think that's a pretty good sample of where you could pick Bol Bol. Kelly Olynyk, Shabazz Muhammad, Giannis, Lucas Nogueira, Dennis Schroeder, Shane Larkin, Sergei Karasev, Tony Snell, Gorgie Deng, Mason Plumlee, Solomon Hill, and Tim Hardaway was 24. You're telling me that you wouldn't bet on Bol Bol over getting one of those outcomes other than Giannis? I mean, Dennis Schroeder was like a sixth man, and he was the second best player in that. Kelly Olynyk's like a bench big. Shabazz Muhammad's out of the league. Shane Larkin's out of the league. Lucas Nogueira was like a third string center at his peak. Tony Snell's like a 3-and-D wing, eighth man. Gorgie Deng plays a little bit. Mason Plumlee's like a backup center.
Yeah, because I think Olynyk, with Boston, I mean, he was good, but he's a reserve big man. He's a really nice second unit player. Mason Plumlee, really good backup center. Hardaway's a starter. Solomon Hill had one good year in his whole career, and then got an enormous contract off it. Snell was in the rotation for some of his career, but not anymore, right? So, it's just so worth it. It's like not even, I don't even think it's a debate really.
Right, and it's not like Bol wasn't productive in college. Like the dude averaged 23, 10, shot 50% from the field, blocked 3 shots a game. I get his like center of gravity's high and his motor's not very good, but you have to roll the dice. I think the same way with Jonte Porter. I think he's going to drop in the second round. I can't believe that.
I think the Bucks could take a swing at 30.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great spot. I mean, if you're drafting, Jonte Porter is an amazing passer. He can block shots. He doesn't have a great body, but he can step out and shoot a little bit. He can make free throws. I just think that's a physical package I'll bet on. Obviously, he tore the ACL twice, and at what point do you worry that? The entire family's had injuries, but if you could have Jonte or Bol, so you're basically betting Bol's probably higher upside, but some injury risk and the motor risk, and then Jonte all injury risk plus lower upside. Who would you take?
I'd take Bol, even with the foot injury.
Yeah, no, I think I'd buy that as well. All right, before we wrap up the draft content, deep sleeper. Who's your deep draft sleeper who finds himself a useful NBA player?
So I really like all the second round point guards. Really, Tremont Waters, Shamori Pons, Jordan Bone, Cody Martin. Martin especially, I think he could fill a nice role as kind of like a unique, like a bigger point guard. Maybe you can play him next to a scoring guard in the backcourt. But I've always liked Bone. He's a nice kind of steady backup who can hit shots. Waters is certainly undersized, but I think we see time and time again these guys who go undrafted at the point guard position who are like the big name college players. Their NBA measurables aren't good, but they can just hit shots and they can just play. I think Waters can really fit that mold. And then Shamori Pons could give you a scoring guard, and he's a much better passer than people give him credit for.
All right, I got 2 for you. Number 1, Josh Reeves. He's just a dog defender. I think he can carve out a role. He can defend. He can play make a little bit. He can hit shots. He was one of the few guys on Penn State who could make a 3 last year. That was big. I think NBA spacing will help him. Him having the ball is not a good thing in college basketball. He's 6'5". He's not really a point guard, but he had to do it sometimes, and he was really solid. I think Josh Reeves could be a guy who carves out a role. And then my other guy that I think is sneaky is like Kenny Wooten. I know it's going to be very difficult, as we've said, with so many centers out there, but he's a guy I'd grab on a 2-way if I could, and just teach him how to play offense, because that guy is a scary athlete.
Agreed. And then I think one other guy who's almost guaranteed to be drafted, who I don't know if a lot of college basketball fans realize, is Daquan Jeffries from Tulsa. He just fits that like small ball 4 or like physical 3-man role, because I think everyone realizes that Schofield's going to get drafted. he's kind of like the poor man Schofield that someone's going to pick late second round.
Yeah, I mean, he can do everything that Schofield does, and then I really like him a lot. I think he's going to be solid. I think Terrence Davis is the other guy I really like. I know he's really risen on draft boards, but I liked him before. I liked him in like his sophomore year at Ole Miss, because my brother watched a lot of Ole Miss, and I was like, all right, this dude, I'm in on this dude. And he just kind of went quiet and had a nice year for Kermit this year.
And then just maybe one other guy who is seen as like a lottery pick in the preseason, who I think someone will take a flyer on in the second round, to be Jalen Horde from Wake Forest.
Oh yeah, he was like I remember like Sam Vecini and Cole Zwicker on like right after the draft last year, like Jalen Horde number 2 overall prospect, and like I know Wake Forest kind of stunk, but like take a shot.
Yeah, maybe Toronto at 59. I think Cody Martin could go Golden State at 58, especially if Sean Livingston retires.
Yeah, it could work.
Okay, should we move on to shooting guard rankings?
Yeah, we should hear it.
Okay, so for people who didn't get the memo last time, we were irked by Andy Katz's rankings. I didn't even get into, the order of the players in the ranking. I was just very worked up about how he couldn't even classify people with positions. And so it seems like a lot of people disagree with me in this. We were having conversations in our group chat with Michael Hunter and Connor Hope, but I think in most cases, I said 95%. Maybe I'll walk that back to like 85%. But the positions are just so clear to anyone who has followed basketball that to I think in most instances, for you to say that you can't tell who's at what position for a player, you're like intentionally forgetting everything that you've known about basketball.
Yes. I mean, like, it's tough because there are times when guys are being played out of position, and how do you value like when Jordan Caroline was the 5 for a year for Nevada? I mean, no one was like he's a true 5, but he was the 5 for the year. I think that is the more difficult thing. Like, what did he play last year?
Yeah, and for my rankings, I think it's very important to have a clear set of guidelines, for a philosophy when ranking. And for me, these rankings are, these shooting guards are going to be the shooting guard in their projected lineup. More, if not more than any other position, because I think almost all of them will be shooting guards more often than any other position. That'll be their position in the starting lineup. So I think with all these, that's pretty clear. So for me, there was a clear top 5, I guess. And so number 1, I had Miles Powell, obviously the prolific shooter and scorer from Seton Hall. Number 2, Jerron Cumberland from Cincinnati. Number 3, the freshman Anthony Edwards for Georgia. Number 4, Sam Merrill for Utah State. Number 5, Ayo Dosunmu from Illinois. Now, the first 4, the Powell, Cumberland, Merrill trio, they all put up huge numbers last year, right? All averaged like 20 points. I think Merrill and Cumberland were around 4 assists per game. Powell's an elite shooter who has to take difficult shots, and he's awesome. And I think Edwards is also going to get into that range of averaging close to 20 points a game this year. And then Ayo Dosunmu averaged like 13-ish last year. I think he'll get up to that 18 to 20 range this year. I mean, I'm a big Dosunmu guy. I think he has a super high upside, as a combo guard. From watching him at U18s last year, he's one of the guys where you could make an argument that he's a point guard. But I think all these other guys, in that top 5 for starters, I think they're definitely the shooting guard.
I would agree. I mean, Dosunmu averaged more assists than Frazier, but I felt like Frazier had the ball more, which is always difficult. But I mean, Dosunmu's upside is real. I mean, he averaged 15, 4, and 3 in Big Ten play this year. Shot the ball okay at 34%. I mean, I could get a bit better, but with a good size, I think he's definitely a reasonable bet, especially over some of the guys you had like that 5 to 10 range, like a Josh Langford, especially given the usage that he'll get over Langford when you're gonna have Aaron Henry, Cassius Winston, and many other guys around.
So do you think that this is an accurate grade for Sam Merrill? at 4?
Oh yeah, I mean he was the best player on a top 25 team last year. Average 20, absurdly efficient leader. Can really shoot the ball. I mean, I think if you put like the problem is, I mean, if you put Tyshawn Alexander, let's say on Utah State, are they any better? Probably not, but I don't know if they're any worse. Like, I don't think you could go to like I'm trying to figure out the point where a team would be worse in your rankings by having Merrill over, or would be worse by having like the player on your list over Merrill, and I think it'd be like Kellen Grady, Joe Wieskamp range. Jordan, yeah, AJ Lawson, I think, is the first guy.
Which is interesting because for me, when making this, the top 12 was very clear. Like all those guys were definitely on the list for me, and the order was pretty straightforward. I mean, 6 through 10 got a little messy, but there's a clear divide between 12 and 13. Which for me, 12 was Kellen Grady and 13 was Joe Wieskamp. For the most part, the top 12 is like really proven guys who have put up big numbers. Lawson hasn't really hit his peak, AJ Lawson that is,
Right.
and then a couple freshmen in there. But for the most part, those guys, we know that they're going to be awesome. And so then for me, we'll go 6 through 12. I guess we'll do this whole group together. But I went Josh Langford at 6, Kamar Baldwin at 7, Tyshawn Alexander at 8, Tyrese Maxey at 9, Jordan Ford at 10, AJ Lawson at 11, and Kellen Grady at 12.
Yeah, no, I don't have any major disagreements there. I'm not totally sure I wouldn't have Joe. I think I would have Joe Wieskamp over AJ Lawson. I'll say that.
Okay.
I'm a big Wieskamp guy, partially because I think we all have like unconscious biases based on how guys performed, especially against our favorite teams. Like Joe Wieskamp just cooked against us, against Northwestern, and so I was like, all right, yeah, like he's really good, and like his numbers back it up. Like, as a freshman, he averaged 11 points, 5 rebounds, shot 43% from the field on a tournament team, or 43% from 3 on a tournament team. Whereas AJ Lawson was on a worse team, put up bigger numbers but at lower efficiency. Didn't shoot it quite a little bit better of a shot creator. But I think Wieskamp, especially, given the questions about Jordan Bohannon this year, he's going to have a much bigger role in the offense. Is going to be really, really good. So I could see Wieskamp definitely ahead of Lawson, and I could even see him kind of sneaking into that top 10.
What do you think about Jordan Ford at 10? He was a hard guy to nail down for me because, I mean, he was on a pretty good team, put up big numbers, low assist numbers, but, a lot of these guys, even though that they're the 2 guard, they do rack up, pretty solid assist numbers. But, he can really shoot and really score. Undersized guy. For me, I just feel like the Kamar Baldwins, the Tyshawn Alexanders, the Ayo Dosunmus, I just feel like they're better, kind of intangibly. Like I don't know if there's a real quantitative argument to make besides the level of competition as to why they're potentially better than Ford.
Yeah, so I think Ford is definitely is probably more of a 1 than a 2. It's one of those things where like they have a bigger quote unquote point guard who is more of a ball mover, and then the ball's in the hands, so it's more semantic. But I think I would probably wind up saying that Ford is the 1. Regardless, though, it's really tough for me to differentiate between Baldwin, Tyshawn Alexander, and Jordan Ford. I think you may be slighting the mid-major a little bit just because, I mean, you're saying, oh, well, look how good a numbers Kamar Baldwin put up in the Big East. But, Kamar Baldwin was on I would say, measurably worse team. Same with Creighton. I mean, I don't think Creighton was any significant amount better than St. Mary's.
I think if Creighton were healthy, they would have been better than St. Mary's. But Alexander is someone who I think could really take a step up next year, and kind of establish himself as more of a national name. Whereas as Baldwin, the high ranking for me here comes in. He's a very good defender. He's going to be asked to do a lot again on offense, so his scoring is going to be very high. He'll get a few assists, and he's a really good defender. Plus, we kind of know what we're getting. Where Alexander, this ranking, I think has like more of like an upside portion to it. Ford, I think, would fall in closer to the Baldwin level. Like I don't know how much better Ford's going to be this year. Which I don't know if that's fair or not.
I will say, to be clear, I'm not saying that he's definitively worse or better. I'm just saying I don't think it's necessarily fair to say, oh, well, this mid-major guy is probably it's not quantifiable. He's worse, but these high-major guys who put up the same or worse numbers on worse teams than Ken Pom are better because they play in the Big East.
Yeah, and I can see that.
And I could see Tyshawn taking another step. I think he's awesome. I've been the biggest Tyshawn Alexander believer since the preseason, if you recall.
Yes, I do.
So, I certainly buy that. I think Ford is amazing. When he gets going, it's fun. But I'm a big Wieskamp guy as well. I know, and I mentioned him at 13. If that's the way you want to kind of segue down into that later range.
I just want to touch on two other things first.
Sure.
One being Tyrese Maxey. He's at 9. I think he probably will have the lowest numbers of anyone in like the top 14-ish. He's probably only going to average 12 or 13 points a game. But he probably the second or third best draft prospect. So that was kind of hard to evaluate where he should be just because of Kentucky's roster makeup. And then Josh Langford, he's a guy who's put up numbers. He averaged 15 this year in very limited time. Shot a good percentage from 3. The knock on him is always, he was this super highly touted recruit who hasn't really taken that next step. Is 6, you think, a good spot for him?
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's difficult because Langford is competing with a bunch of best players on their team, and being the second best player on his team makes it a lot more difficult, maybe even the third best. But I mean, a guy who can average 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and shoot the ball 40% from 3. I mean, to me, that's definitely a top 7, 8 shooting guard in the country. I mean, he to me is very clearly in that range. It's just a matter of how do you value kind of the raw production, because on one hand, he should be more efficient because he's not having the ball all the time. But on the other hand, he's putting up big numbers despite not having it all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess my question is if you swap Kamar Baldwin for Michigan at Michigan State, for Josh Langford, and you swap Josh Langford for Kamar Baldwin at Butler, who's better and who's worse?
I think they're both worse.
Probably. Well, Kamar needs the ball more.
Yeah.
So that's fair. But, I don't know. You use it with Tyshawn because he uses the ball more? Or use the ball a little less, I should say?
Yeah.
It's tough. But I guess I just don't see any negligible change. I think maybe the team with Langford's better. So, yeah, I don't hate the Langford spot at all.
Okay, next we have 13 through 17, kind of a grouping for me here. We talked about Wieskamp at 13. 14, I went Paul Scruggs, which seems a little high, but it's kind of where he fell there. 15, we're going to remove. That's TJ Hawes. I didn't realize he played so much point guard last year. And then looking at the roster for this year, I think he will be the primary point guard. So he'll be taken off the list. Then Skylar Mays at 16, Lamonte Turner at 17. Then we'll throw in Brian Antoine at 18.
Interesting. Just I think you're a little too high on Quentin Gooden. I think you're a little too high on Scruggs. For me, I guess I don't see the significant difference between what Paul Scruggs did and what Skylar Mays did. And Skylar Mays did it on a much better team. I mean, Mays is a better athlete. Mays hits so many big shots. I think Mays is probably better. I think Mays is probably the better basketball player than Paul Scruggs. He's an experienced guy. He's gonna have to score more. He shot the ball worse than I thought he did this year. He only shot 31% from three. That is surprising. But he's a guy who gets downhill. He made a lot of big shots, and with Smart not there, Smart will be there, but he'll be playing point guard instead of Tremont Waters. I think I think Mays could have a really big year. I think he's to me better than Paul Scruggs.
Okay. Brian Antoine at 8. Yeah. I mean, from 13 down, it was very tight for me. At 8, one for me. I think he's going to be Villanova's leading scorer. I think he's going to average 12 or 13 points a game. But when, comparing him to guys like Turner and Mays, who 15 range, Paul Scruggs, could average like 15 and 5 and 5, or like 4 and 5. And then Wieskamp, might average 16 or 17 points a game too. I was very uncertain about the Antoine ranking, and I didn't want to just throw the three remaining freshmen, 23 through 25. I felt like that was kind of a cop out.
That's fair. I mean, I think my challenge with the Antoine, with a guy like Antoine, or a guy like Sam Williamson, or a guy like Jamius Ramsey, is I think all of them have the potential to be clearly better than this bottom tier. But like, when you have proven Isaiah Joe, proven Admin Gilder, I guess proven to a certain extent Eric Ayala, Ethan Thompson on the worst team, Lamonte Turner, like it's such a difficult game to value a freshman in terms of what we think they'll be versus what we already know in terms of a baseline of what Isaiah Joe is, let's say. Like, we know the baseline of what Isaiah Joe was last year, and now we put him in a better system with better players around him.
No, and I agree totally. That was probably the hardest thing for me. Because I think Thompson's going to have a huge year for Oregon State. I mean, they're like the 8th or 9th best team in the Pac-12, if that. Williamson, I think he's going to average double figures. I think he's probably the starting shooting guard next to Nwora. So I felt kind of comfortable with that. Ramsey, I think, has the highest variance of those three freshmen, because I think Antoine's going to play and score a lot, right? I think Williamson's going to play and you need his 3-point shooting. I think he's guaranteed playing time. Ramsey, I could see him being the leading for Texas Tech, but couldn't you also see a path where you have Moretti, Kyler Edwards, Chris Clark, and all guys score more than Ramsey, and we look up and Ramsey's average like 7 or 8 points a game?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think it just kind of depends on what the role is, because I've really penciled in Kyler Edwards to the starting lineup. I've penciled in as Moretti, Ramsey, Kyler Edwards, Chris Clark, and TJ Holyfield. Like, there's still enough guys around that program who are good. You could talk about a guy like Deshaun Corprew. Talk about a guy like Terrence Shannon, who's a wing. I'm blanking on their backup point guard.
Clarence Naldoni or Kevin McCullough?
Oh, both of them. Yes, I was thinking McCullough, but both of them work. Like, there's so many guys where, like, if Ramsey isn't very good, he could very much get relegated into like an 18. If he's not like perfectly ready, he could get relegated into like an 18 to 20 minute a game role, because they have so much depth, especially if some guys are ready to take minutes.
I agree, and that's not a risk. As we'll go through the remaining list for these guys, 19 Ethan Thompson, 20 Admin Gilder, 21 Sam Williamson, 22 Isaiah Joe, 23 Eric Ayala, 24 Noah Locke, and 25 Jamius Ramsey.
I need more mid-major love, Brad.
Well, that's the thing where I gave a look to I don't know where I put it, but Jahavian Jackson was one of them. Trying to think, there were two other guys who I looked at, but I mean, at the end of the day, because when I made my list of like 40 or like 50 guys, and I had Christian Keeling on there, and then I'm like, all right, Keeling's probably going to average 8 or 9 points a game, and he's someone who put up big numbers at the mid-major level. It just made me, it just made it very, very difficult to include like a Jahavian Jackson in there when you have, like a Noah Locke, Isaiah Joe, Eric Ayala at the back of the rankings who are going to play on, for the most part, good teams, and they've already put up pretty good numbers. That was kind of a hard thing for me to reconcile.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think there's also a difference between like Christian Keeling's 18 points on a mid-pack Big South team and like a truly special mid-major player on like a very competitive top 100 team. Like if we're talking like Grant Riller, I don't know if we consider him point guard at 2 because he's talking last week as well, but like with Grant Riller, that was a guy on a top 80 Ken Pom team who averaged 23 points and 4 assists. I think that's tangibly different to me than like 200 Ken Pom guy you can score at 45% for the field, like Jahad Proctor, let's say.
Yeah. So the other two mids that I considered were Antoine Davis. Well, wasn't sure if he's a point guard or not. And then Jarek Harding from Weber State ultimately chose to cut all three of those guys in favor of Ramsey. But because I'm moving TJ Hawes off, I do have a spot open. So I want to run through the guys who just missed it for me to see if, who you would put into a spot, and, would you replace any of these guys with guys who we listed? And that's Jonah Matthews from USC, John Petty from Alabama, Devontae Shuler from Ole Miss, Samir Doty from Auburn, and Brandon Williams from Arizona.
I would probably throw Petty on there as a bet on Nate Oates.
Yeah, because Petty was on there originally, and then I moved him off for Ethan Thompson because Petty's kind of flatlined, right? Like he put up pretty much the same numbers both years, and I think he shot it worse this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't know how much better he was going to be.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I mean, I think the one thing with Petty is it's just like what you're betting on. For me, is that a coach gets him to do different stuff.
Okay.
Like Nate Oates could get him, like, could Nate Oates turn him in from just like a shooter to like a Jeremy Harris type? Like a long athletic wing who defends a little bit, gets to the rim, streaky shooter, but that's not the only thing he's valuable for.
Yeah, I don't know if he handles the ball like Harris can.
True. No, I don't. I'm not saying he does. I'm just saying like generally like that type role.
Because going through these other kind of last five guys, Jonah Matthews just doesn't feel right. Nothing tangible there. But like I think I could include him and that would be reasonable. But he averaged like 12 points a game and shot it well from three. Devontae Shuler, that's another one. Just it just doesn't feel right. And then Brandon Williams, I think he'll be the starting two guard, but they brought in the grad transfer, Max Hazard. I mean, they have a bunch of guys who could potentially take minutes for him. And he averaged like 11 points a game last year in limited time. His season was kind of hampered with injury. But I think that there is a chance, more so than some of these other guys, that he sees a smaller role, averages fewer points. And Samir Doty, he didn't put up great numbers last year as the kind of third wheel in the backcourt. Now that he could be the leading scorer, so that's definitely an option too. But so
yeah, I think the thing with Doty, like he didn't put up huge numbers, but like he put up as good a number as you could have expected him to, given Bryce Brown and Jared Harper were there.
Yeah,
I mean he was efficient. You shot it really well from three. You took care of the basketball for the most part. Got some steals defensively. I mean, I'm just kind of looking at the full Auburn roster because you got to project what Javon McCormick starts at point guard, Doty at 2,
Okoro with the 3,
Okoro at the 3. But they go like 4 or 5. Macklemore and Wiley.
I was thinking Purifoy and Macklemore with Wiley and Macklemore splitting the 5.
Yeah, that works. I don't get the Auburn love randomly. This is a random point, but I really don't get the Auburn love.
It's people really like Okoro,
right?
Yeah.
But like, you're betting on like Samir Doughty becoming an All-SEC guy. Javon McCormick running the show at least league average level. Purifoy finding somewhat of his old form.
Wiley finding his old form.
Yeah, like that's a lot of bets for a top 25 team.
Yeah, I don't think that you can rank them.
People are. A lot of people are.
I think that's just they went to the Final Four last year. Like I feel like I have to throw them in now. I think that's probably still a tournament team. Although the SEC is really strong. I mean, especially between like 6 and 12, they're like your Ole Miss, your Georgia, Tennessee, Auburn, even like Missouri.
I was gonna say, like, who do you like more, Auburn or Missouri?
Auburn, I think.
Okay.
But I think Ole Miss versus Auburn is close. I think Georgia versus Auburn is close. I think Tennessee versus Auburn is close.
I mean, I could be swayed for Missouri, given Mark Smith was good last year. Another year of development for Xavier Pinson, Torrance Watson, Javon Pickett. Drew Smith is supposedly excellent. Good recruit in Trey Jackson. Good big man in Jeremiah Tillman. Mario McKinney's a good recruit as well. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't see Auburn as like negligibly better though, and that's kind of scary.
Totally agree. And I mean, their recruiting class is fine. It's more of like a multi-year class. And they do have Jamal Johnson, who's a transfer from Memphis, I believe, 2-guard. And they brought in a JUCO kid recently, who I think people think will play. But I mean that's just around the margins. Like we're talking 7th, 8th, 9th mans.
I remember the Johnson name. I'm trying to pull up his stats right now. Jamal Johnson last year at Memphis was like 7 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. Shot 35% from the field and 33% from 3.
Coming off the bench.
Yeah, maybe shooter off the bench, I guess. Because he took like 75% of his shots for threes. So he's a shooter.
As a freshman on a not great Memphis team, but
yeah, he's a shooter who didn't shoot well.
Yeah. Which is surprisingly not uncommon for freshmen.
It really is. I really love how we got into like a deep dive on Auburn while we were talking about ranking Samir Doty as a potential top 25 shooting guard.
All right, so what's our final answer between Doty and Petty? You think Petty?
Ooh. Oh man, that's really difficult. I think Alabama's a better team. I think Doty's gonna be the better player. So let's go Doty.
Okay. Any other lasting thoughts on the list?
I think it's good. I think you did a good job. I'm a big Wieskamp guy, as I said, but overall, I think you pretty much captured it. Once again, much better than Andy Katz, and one of you all is getting paid for it.
And then I just want to go through the comments on the point guard one, if I can just bring that up real quick. I don't know. Ross Horman, who's a draft guy, said, you need Jalen Pickett in there. I thought that would.
Thank you.
That would make you smile.
Yes.
I mean, there's wasn't enough room really. I mean, he was in the mix.
Well, let me pull your point guard list up.
So like the last 5. So like 21 James Akinjo, 22 John Axel Goodmanson, 23 LaQuincy Rideau, 24 Remy Martin, 25 Dejan Giroux.
I think the idea, you could argue, especially like let's take Akinjo. Like Akinjo is this like quick, speedy point guard, get to the rim. But like Jalen Pickett literally turned Evan Fisher into an all-MAC player. Turned Kevin Degnan, who did nothing for 4 years, into a decent player. Turned Kadeem Smith into something. Like Jalen Pickett made everybody better around him, put up huge scoring numbers, and had no other options.
That's true.
I'm not saying he is. Like I was actually having a conversation with a friend just about Siena as a whole, and I think the argument for why Siena can be really good next year is literally because Jalen Pickett turned a bunch of stiffs into a 17-16 team. What's he going to do when they have actual players? So you put him around high major guys, how would he look? Yeah. I think the athleticism adjustment's real, and the way he played at G League camp is really indicative of that. But I don't have an objection of ranking Jalen, especially if you want to do like the Jalen is Ja thing, even though they're different players. Like you want to hop in early and hope that he turns into Ja and then you look great.
That's true. So just final takeaways from the list. We're going to move Paul Scruggs down. We're going to move Skylar Mays up. We're going to insert Samir Doughty. Did you like Ethan Thompson at 19? Was that fine?
Yeah, I was fine with it. I didn't watch a lot of Oregon State last year. I think the last Oregon State game I watched was the one they lost the bye game to Kent.
I watched one when Kyler Kelly had a big game.
Well, he's a beast.
Didn't watch a lot.
I didn't
watch a lot either.
Kyler Kelly guy.
And then Gilder at 20. Is that fine?
Yeah, fine by me.
Cool. All right, so that's it.
All right, Brad, we got to wrap up this podcast by talking about another guy who's potentially on the top 25 point guard list. Pat Spencer, lacrosse star, headed to Northwestern. This is exciting stuff. This is the stuff that we dream about on this podcast. What can you tell me? What do you think about this commitment? Because I have some thoughts. I have some sourced information as well on him. So I was wondering what you had to say on this.
So I was very surprised because I saw Goodman tweeting a lot that he was trying to play basketball. I didn't think he was going to be able to go high major. That was quite surprising. Northwestern didn't have much to lose. They have open spots. There's not a ton out there left. So I'm fine with his flyer. I mean, where does he fit in? I know you told me he's a point guard. I have a hard time believing he'd be the starting point guard after not having played basketball in like 4 years, competitive basketball. So it's certainly out of the blue. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, he's... So first I'll read the scouting report that I got from a D1 player who watched him play in the last couple of weeks because their school was recruiting him. Now, we don't have the names of a lot of schools involved. It was reported by InsideLacrosse.com today that St. Joe's was another place he took a visit, and he had other visits planned that he did not disclose before he committed to Northwestern. But my source who watched him play says he is tough and can really pass, is athletic as shit. Talked about some dunks that he did, including a self alley-oop right before warming up. After he went through the legs on the self alley-oop while having not really warmed up. He can shoot it pretty well, and he probably would have started on the team that was that I'm mentioning that was recruiting him. That is a not quite a high major program, but they're in that middle tier.
So this person played against him in a pickup game against other Division I basketball players?
Correct. Yeah, he was on a visit.
So where do you think he factors in? Do you think he's going to start? Do you think he's going to come off the bench?
Just the way I framed it, because I got a million texts from my Northwestern friends who care about lacrosse, my Northwestern friends who care about basketball, my people who don't know about Northwestern athletics but saw Pat Spencer's name and were like, ooh. My thought is this. It is not a good sign if Pat Spencer can beat out Boo Boo Booey and Ryan Greer for starting point guard minutes, unless Pat Spencer is God. Right? It's one thing to take a grad transfer and beat out your young guys for minutes. It's another to take a lacrosse player and have him beat out your point guard for minutes.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty scary. That said, I mean, he was a very good high school player. I did the research when I was writing my story about it for WNUR Sports, and here's kind of the few names. Here are a few names of guys who were on the second team All-Met in the DMV. The year he was second team All-Met. So second team was Justin Jennifer, Daquan Bracey from La Tech, Gary Blackston, who was the best player in Prairie View A&M this year, Isaiah White, who just grad transferred to Portland, Gary Jefferson, appeared at Murray State. Pull up a couple more guys because I have the site up as I pull up this article. But it was basically all Division I basketball players plus Pat Spencer. And the first team that year was Drew Edwards, Nico Clarith. Here's more too. Another second teamer was Keandre Cook, Missouri State, who averaged 15 a game. So he was in the range that he should be a recruited D1 basketball player. He is said to be an incredible athlete, an amazing competitor, very great footwork. If he can, and then obviously the reports from Jeff Goodman about him playing summer league against Josh Selby, and holding his own against all the pros that would come play in the summer league. If he can just at the worst, he's just a guy who brings like a competitive fire and like athleticism to your team. And at the best, he starts at point guard. But I think it's not crazy just because he's a lacrosse player that he could be a rotation player, especially on a rebuilding Big Ten team. I don't think it's nuts.
I mean, all those guys have been, playing basketball every day and developing in organized settings while he's been playing lacrosse. So it'll be interesting to see.
But I would
how that translates.
I would just counter that point real quick, Brad, before you take it away too much. You could argue that in a benefit, right? Like basketball is a second sport when he was a second team player in the DMV against Justin Jennifer, against all those guys. Basketball was just like a side passion for him, and he's second team all league. If you give him a summer to work on his game entirely and then a fall to work on his game entirely and basketball-specific weight training and a coaching staff that believes in him, does that become something better if you're just a special athlete, which is what everyone says he is?
I still think it would have been, he would have been much better, had he been playing all along.
Of
right?
course.
Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting to see, because like all the guys that you mentioned are obviously seniors or like fifth year guys because he's in the same grade. How much all those guys were developing, right? Well, he was pretty much stagnant playing lacrosse. If he's as good as like they were as freshmen, or if he's better, but I don't think. I think maybe he'll average like 3 or 4 points a game.
Okay, yeah, about that. I guess my other point on it, in terms of when people were asking about what I thought of Northwestern taking him, was you missed on Kareem South, but let's just say you can have Kareem South for a year, or this kid. Kareem South averaged 13 points and 2 assists as a 6'3" guard on Texas A&M Corpus Christi, which is like a 250 Ken Pom team. The impact he's likely to make at Northwestern, if he's not really a point guard, is somewhat negligible, right? Like he's not. I mean, he could probably eat 15, 20 minutes a game, maybe some outside shots, get scholarship back in the year. It's a win-win. But Spencer, A, is a point guard, B, is more athletic, and B, would seemingly have higher upside. So if the choice is between the two, you're a rebuild anyway. The difference between 13 and 17 and 14 and 18 doesn't really matter. Or 14 and 16, whatever. The math was bad there by me. If you have a guy who could all of a sudden make you 17 and 15 by being like a legitimate starting point guard, and like that's of course the crazy outcome. I don't know what the percentage chance on an outcome of him being like a good starting point guard of the Big Ten. Probably like 1 in 10, 1 in 5, 1 in 20. But it's a low percentage. But that scratch off lottery ticket might be more valuable than Kareem South.
I guess. I mean,
maybe I'm selling myself on something here. I don't know. But I guess my thing is, if you ask me Kareem South or Pat Spencer on a team that's trying to make the tournament, Kareem South. Kareem South or Pat Spencer on a team that's just looking for a lottery ticket, Pat Spencer.
No, I understand your logic, but if you frame it as a proven basketball player or a lottery ticket on someone who's a lottery ticket because they don't play basketball.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's only a lottery ticket because we've never seen him play basketball. Whereas South, we've at least seen that he's he can average 13 a game at the Division I level.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the counter to that argument would be Chris Collins has seen him play basketball. Tavares Hardy, the Loyola coach who recommended him to Chris Collins, has seen him play basketball. The St. Joe's coach who was recruiting him obviously had seen him play basketball. The summer league guys who are saying he's really good have seen him play basketball. Like, I understand that summer leagues and pickup gyms are different than actual D1 basketball games, but I don't see why I don't see what the risk is. I mean, it was really funny because I tweeted when he first committed, Spencer's a great, why the hell not? Northwestern has spots. Spencer's a great athlete and was very good in high school. No risk, potentially high reward. And someone replies, I mean, the risk is they could have brought in a basketball player. And I was like, I mean, yeah, probably. But the basketball player they landed is probably not good enough where it matters. And that's where I'm at.
That makes sense.
But yeah, that's fun. Lacrosse players.
I mean, we had to incorporate this into one of our season bets, our season wagers when late October rolls around. Something Patrick Spencer related has to be in the mix.
I don't think it should be point per game related. It should be minutes per game related.
Yeah, I agree too.
It should be fun. Looking forward to it though. That was a fun little news day that I had. Getting texts from every single person I know who cares about Northwestern athletics, being like, "Why the hell did we just take a lacrosse player?" That was fun. But anyway, anything else, Brad, before we wrap this podcast?
No, I think maybe next time we'll touch on some of the transfers that we haven't, but probably these guys are going to go by the wayside, and I mean that's fine.
A lot of them weren't important enough for it to matter. But it's all right. We will wrap this one up. Appreciate you all listening. Hopefully you enjoy the content that I'll have coming this week. Enjoy the NBA draft, and we'll be working to continue to improve the podcast as the off season goes on. Hopefully, as we've said before, get a couple of guests. I'll be trying to plan out the summer in the next couple of days. I just got home from Northwestern after a very successful end of the sophomore year. So excited about that. Excited about what this summer will bring when I have the time. So appreciate you all listening and have a great night.